Good morning and welcome everyone. I am Shamika Goita, Pro Bono Development Manager at PILA. Thank you all for joining us in person and online for the launch of the new All-Ireland NGO Guides. As you can see, today's event is a hybrid one. As such, can I please ask that all questions be held over to the end where we will have a Q&A session. Also, can I ask that online attendees keep themselves on mute for the duration of the proceedings to avoid disruptions. These NGO guides are a collaborative effort between the Pearls Project in Northern Ireland, local law firm Arthur Cox, and PILA. Today's launch will focus on the Republic of Ireland NGO guides, which are a series of 5 guides, namely an NGO guide to being appointed an amicus in the Irish court system, an NGO guide to individual non-court complaint mechanisms at the European level, an NGO guide for engaging with UN special procedures mandate holders, an NGO guide for taking individual complaints to UN human rights treaty bodies, and lastly, an NGO guide to judicial review. We have a number of interesting speakers lined up, and they will seek to explain the process and rationale behind the guides, as well as illustrate how the guides can be used practically. These guides are available on the PILA and Pearls Project websites and are also easily accessible to those of you in person through the QR codes that you will find on your seats. Without further ado, I will hand you over to FLAC CE Eilish Berg.
Thanks, Shamika. Good morning, and I'm delighted to welcome you all to the launch of these guides for NGOs across the Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland. This launch is significant, I think, for a number of reasons. Because COVID and Brexit have demonstrated the heightened need for cross-border dialogue and collaboration. And this cross-border project, I believe, is the first of its kind that we're launching here today. And as Shamika says, it's done in collaboration with Public Interest Litigation Support Project in Northern Ireland and Arthur Cox. And I want in particular to welcome our colleagues from the Pearls Project, Maria Montplusky and Caroline Minnick and her team from Arthur Cox today. Both Pearls and FLAC's Public Interest Law Project, PILA, seek to support the legal community and civil society in using the law to advance social change. And I suppose there are a number of very well-known barriers that hamper individuals and civil society from bringing litigation in the public interest. These include the risk of costs, inadequate legal aid, insufficient legal advice, complex rules on standing, and the difficulties NGOs or civil society organisations face in trying to manage legal challenges on behalf of their members. Other difficulties include trying to enforce socioeconomic rights before the courts, where the courts probably show excessive deference to the legislature and weak interpretations of constitutional provisions. But the very first barrier in terms of access to justice is finding out information about what can be done. And I suppose it's been our experience that NGOs may not have easy access to information, especially about the important mechanisms that are described in detail in these guides today. So I'm confident and really pleased that these guides address that very first formidable barriers. Some of the mechanisms detailed in these guides may not have the same level of barriers that exist in bringing traditional litigation. And very often these mechanisms invoking human rights treaties provide a very public forum for airing human rights breaches and can produce really positive results that litigation may not itself produce. I think they provide important forums where the government are called to account, not by the courts, but by their peers on the human rights treaty committees. Amicus Curiae is also a very important tool to bring a broader range of experience and expertise to the courts, provided, of course, the courts are prepared to hear it. And judicial review is vitally important in holding the state and public bodies to account. It is the most important public law remedy for people who are disadvantaged and living in poverty. and it's vital both to democracy and the rule of law. And we in TRAC are very concerned about proposed changes, which will make it harder for claimants to seek leave for judicial review. I want to take this opportunity just to thank a number of people, in particular the peer review panel, who provided their huge expertise and experience in reviewing these guides. And these are Kathy Smith, Tina Boland, Rithika Moore-Badira, David Keane, Conrad Bryan, who's with us today, and Leisha O'Driscoll. I also want to use this opportunity to thank PILA's supporting and sustaining partners. We in FLAC and PILA rely very heavily on the support for the work of FLAC and for the work of PILA, and we know during COVID that the queries from NGOs doubled, and without the support from the sustaining and supporting partners, we wouldn't be able to carry out that. But the PILA partners also provide very stellar assistance to the core work of FLAC, the more traditional work of FLAC, and that's our phone line, and both Matheson's and Arthur Cox are now providing very, very important vital support to our phone line, which again since COVID has been overwhelmed with queries by people looking for legal information and advice. And without the support of Arthur Cox and without the support of Matheson, a whole lot of people wouldn't be able to get basic information about their rights. And I'm really pleased that Arthur Cox's work in this regard has been recognised next week, and I understand that they've been nominated for an award for their work on the phone line. So a huge shout out to Carl Ann and to Jeff Moore and all those people from Cox's who are here today. And also to Esmes and the team in Good Bodies and Neve and the team in Matheson's. I just want to give a special thanks to Shamika, who started work during COVID, who is leading the PILA work. It can't have been easy coming all the way here, trying to find childcare, which is non-existent, trying to find housing, which is non-existent, and also to lead the team with such flair, and also to thank Bobby, who has just left, and Demetra, who was very kind to come back and help us out. And my colleagues in fact have also been great. We're down a number of staff due to illnesses and absences, and they've had to step up and work way outside their comfort zone. So thank you very much, Kathy, and thank you, Karina, and thank you, Mioli, who's here at someone that we are trying to put the place together. So thank you very much. I'll hand you back to the lecture, or to Shanika.
Thank you very much, Eilish. Our next speaker is Carol Ann of Arthur Cox. Carol Ann leads the pro bono practice at Arthur Cox and is responsible for the strategic development and coordination of pro bono.
Thanks, Shamika, and good morning, everybody. It's really a pleasure to be with you all today to launch the NGO Engagement Guide series. We started this project back in 2020, so a different time in the world than today, and most of the work that we've done together has been through Zoom calls and team calls. And in fact, I've only just this morning met some of the partners on the project for the first time in real life. So as you can imagine, particularly sweet to be able to be here together as a group to launch the project and share our work with you all and the NGO community. Arthur Cox became involved in this project through our pro bono practice. Pro bono is something we've done as a firm for a long time, but in recent years, we've really worked towards structuring our pro bono work with my appointment as pro bono associate, with the creation of a pro bono training seat, but also the commitment and the value we place on our pro bono work is evident through the scale of the work that takes place across the firm. Year on year, we see more and more colleagues getting involved, helping more and more clients. In the last year, we completed over 15,000 pro bono hours of legal work for the first time, which shows the scale of appetite and dedication our colleagues have across the firm to undertaking pro bono work. It also, of course, shows us the level of need that there is in the community. And I think it really says something that when we see things like the crises in Afghanistan and Ukraine happening, the needs when it comes to charity law and employment law, working with migrants to exercise their rights, that colleagues can step up to help people gain access to justice. But it's really through collaboration that we can do our best work. And I think the guide that we've that we're launching here today is really good evidence of that. It's a combination of the work with my colleagues led by Gavin Woods in the Dublin office, also our litigation colleagues in Belfast, together with PILA in Dublin and the PILS project represented by Maria McCluskey here with us today, that everybody was able to come together to contribute to these guides. Also, we were very lucky to have peer reviewers north and south to review and comment on the work, as well as NGOs themselves contributing to the case studies in each guide. So truly a team effort to make this happen today. And we know that collaborating with NGOs like FLAC can result in good things, because we've been lucky enough to work together with FLAC and the PILA team on a number of different projects at this point. Over the years, we've placed people on secondment with FLAC. We work together on a weekly basis with the employment clinic on a Thursday. We also are lucky to contribute to the FLAC information line each Wednesday. And we work in many different ways with Shamika and her team by accepting ad hoc pro bono referrals and projects with the PILA folks. So this is tried and tested collaboration, and we know it works well. So you can imagine when PILA first got in contact to say, any interest in helping out with this, we were quick to put our hands up, and it's certainly been a successful endeavour. Because what we see is when different stakeholders from different organisations come together, they bring with them unique skills and experience, and when you combine those, really we can achieve good results together. And that's, I think, what we see through the NGO engagement series that has been launched today. Hopefully a platform that we'll continue to build on in the time ahead. So thank you again. Very nice to see you all this morning. And I think I'm going to pass you back to Shamika.
Thank you, Carla. Delighted as always to be partnering with your team. Next up, we have Nisha Costco from Alcohol as well. Nisha is a senior associate in the litigation, dispute resolution and investigations department at Alcohol, and advises clients on all aspects of litigation as well as alternative dispute resolution.
Hi everyone, it's great to be here with you all, finally. As we've just heard from Caroline, pro bono is really an essential element of the culture at Arthur Cox. And as an associate in the litigation department, I get to see that firsthand from just the range of work that my colleagues are involved in. Things like family reunifications, legal education, and more recently we have a project on surrogacy rights. As a department as a whole, we try to be really strong partners in pro bono within the firm. And so whenever Caroline came to us way back in October of 2020 to pitch this project, we were very keen to get involved. Our task, as it was kind of described to us, was to update some pre-existing guides and to create some new ones that could be used as practical tools for NGOs who were seeking access to the legal system and access to justice without having to start traditional litigation in a way that could help them further their very important work. And I think it's this element of practicality that really sets our guides apart. Lawyers are not necessarily known for being great at explaining concepts in layman's terms or in ways that are easily accessible. And unfortunately, when I started my research for this project, that really became glaringly apparent. So it's not that there isn't necessarily material about the topics that are covered in our guides that are already available online. It's just that a lot of it could not be described as practical or user-friendly or accessible. A lot of it is focused on hypothetical or theoretical sort of elements, and a lot more is focused on lawyers themselves. And so it's replete with the kind of technical jargon that comes along with that. So our aim was to collate that information and to distill it down into something that was going to be user-friendly and something that could be effectively a high-level one-stop shop that was specifically designed for and aimed at the NGO community, and something that could assist them in accessing the legal mechanisms which are already available, but which NGOs either may not be aware of, or maybe something that is a little bit daunting to them to use because it just does not seem something that is easily accessible. Now that the guides are finalised and I can actually see them in physical form, I must say, kind of just from a personal level, how proud I am of what we've been able to achieve. I think that they are, in essence, pathways to justice. I know that's a bit cheesy to say that, but I think that they really do have the potential to have that impact. We hope that they will allow NGO partners to not only learn about the different avenues of justice that are available to them, but to really bolster their confidence in making use of them in a way that they may not have previously been confident doing. And this is whether the right avenue might be judicial review, might be the amicus process, UN special procedures, or individual complaints either at a European level or at a UN level. We believe that these guides have great potential because we know that where NGOs have made use of the mechanisms that we're describing, there has been a highly beneficial result. And the case studies that are included in these guides are really a testament to that and to the results that can be achieved whenever NGOs are involved and are able to speak on the topics that often they are the most knowledgeable about. As I say, we had hoped that these would be a kind of high-level initial one-stop shop, but should an NGO decide to explore any of the avenues further, of course, they're going to be welcome to approach PILA and the PILS project. The guides are a starting point, we think, and are definitely not designed to replace that important relationship and that important support that would still be available. But we hope that with the guides in hand, NGOs will be better placed to start that process with a more firm understanding of the options that are available to them, what might be most beneficial, and what the key steps would be in those processes. Ultimately, in drafting these guides, we understood our goal to be improving access to the legal system for the organisations who are working on the ground in human rights day in and day out. And we hope that you will agree that the guides have created practical tools that can achieve this. And we're very excited to witness what impact they might have in the future. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Sinead Lucy, the manager solicitor. Sinead joined back in 2016, and having been senior legal officer at the IHRC, later IHRAC, Sinead has considerable knowledge of the amicus procedure and is ideally placed to speak about
Morning, everybody. So I'm delighted to be asked this morning to the launch of these 5 accessible and informative guides for NGOs, exploring the different mechanisms that may be used and forums that may be accessed, national and international, by NGOs to progress social justice issues and bring added value to their existing work. I really have to congratulate everybody involved in these guides. I have nothing to do with them, so I can do that. And like all good ideas, they seem really obvious. Why didn't somebody do this before? But here they are now, and they're an invaluable resource, I think. In particular, the guides step outside the narrow context of court-based processes and approaches to justice. Consider other forms and mechanisms that can provide alternative routes to advancing rights. However, and I'm going to contradict myself, I'm going to look at one of those narrow court-based processes, and I'm going to talk to the guide on the amicus curiae, or friend of the court procedure. And already before I start, I'm using Latin, typical of the courts. So we're talking about amicus curiae, quickly translated, it's friend of the court. So the role of an amicus curiae in the courts and the process for appointing an amicus curiae is not really explored, and perhaps less understood even amongst the legal fraternity. Insofar as these guides have the objective of guiding NGOs along the road to increased access to justice, then I think this guide might represent the road less travelled, but nonetheless valuable as a resource. The guide gives a succinct insight into the role of an amicus curiae in the courts, including the European Court of Human Rights, of value not only to NGOs, but lawyers as well, I suspect. It sets out the procedure involved and then goes on to explain some of the complexity involved and the principles that have been established by the courts to date. As pointed out in the guide, the jurisdiction to appoint an amicus curiae is sparingly exercised by the Irish courts. So while it's an important means to ventilate a legal issue that engages the public interest, the opening for such interventions is narrow. And this guide very usefully picks its way through the approach of the courts and points to where an intervention may be welcomed and almost as importantly, where it won't be so welcome. The balance, so some of these principles and some of the points that have been established by the court and have to be observed. So the balance to be achieved between having an interest and an expertise in the issue arising before the court, but yet being able to demonstrate your neutrality. Understanding that the role of an amicus exists essentially on the sidelines of the case and not on the field of play with the other actors in the case. Resisting the temptation to urge a broader case on the court and keeping to the issue that the court has to determine, no matter how important your organisation thinks those broader issues are, or the importance of the public interest would be served by having those issues determined by a court. At the same time, an amicus is not just there to repeat the argument of the parties or to amplify the point made by one party over another, and must bring a unique perspective not otherwise available to the court. There is a need to be thrifty with the time of the court, as that time is most likely going to be paid for by one or other of the parties to the case, and the courts will police that quite strictly. The courts themselves have recognised that this is a fine line that an amicus must tread, and this guide is invaluable in addressing those considerations. And as stated already, it's an initial framework for consideration. It isn't the end point, but it's a really good starting point for exploring the options. So I'm going to very briefly refer to an example of where an amicus was well positioned to make a very valuable contribution to a case, and another case where an amicus was identified as straying outside the parameters of the role and was heavily criticised by the Supreme Court for doing so. So during 2016 and 2018, FLAC represented a US-based NGO called EPIC, great title for an NGO, the organisation was concerned with data privacy and transparency, and which wished to appear as an amicus in a case before the Irish High Court. The case was a very high-profile case and concerned the Data Protection Commissioner and a complaint made to the Data Protection Commissioner in relation to data transfers being made by Facebook in Ireland to the US. The case was going to have huge ramifications for big tech companies and also for various agreements and decisions made at an EU level. There were in excess of 9 applications, no, there weren't in excess of 9 applications, there were exactly 9 applications made to be joined in the case as amicus, including an application from the US government, which obviously had an interest. 5 of those applications were rejected because the court had to manage its time and prioritise the expertise that would be of most value to it in determining the case. FLAC's client EPIC had an agenda, of course, had a particular interest. The case could be of benefit in ensuring a high level of data protection in the US if EU standards could in some way be imported. However, it was also apparent that as an organisation, it had expertise regarding data protection in the US that would assist the court in determining whether the case brought by the DPC effectively had merit, in which case it would automatically be referred to the Court of Justice of the EU. In taking on the client, FLAC came to the view that despite the intensive resources involved, and the case ran for 6 weeks in the High Court, to represent EPIC in the case, there was an issue of access to justice in ensuring that the NGO was represented, and also, of course, a very significant public interest in ensuring the data protection issues were properly ventilated before the court and that the position regarding US law was properly clarified. EPIC made submissions in the High Court and then before the Court of Justice of the EU as regards the relevant US law. And it was evident that this unique perspective, along with the other evidence offered in the case, was important in supporting the decision of the High Court to refer the case in the first place and the Court of Justice of the EU in coming to a view regarding the deficiencies in US data protection law. So this is a very positive example of an NGO with a very unique perspective and expertise, which was tailored to the needs of the case and the court concerned, and where the parties themselves could not provide the same insight. On the other hand, another example, so a more recent decision of the Supreme Court in Dowdall and the DPP, which was a case concerning the government's proclamation of a state of emergency, allowing for non-jury trials before the Special Criminal Court. It is worth noting this case for its warning against an amicus going outside the parameters of the case presented to court. Unusually, the court had allowed the Irish Human Rights and Equality Commission to make written and oral submissions in the case before deciding whether it would actually accept those submissions and allow the commission to appear as amicus. So I'm going to quote from the case because it gives a sense of what the Supreme Court thought of that intervention. So this was the Chief Justice who said, "It is central therefore to the function of any amicus curiae that it assists the court in resolving the case before it. The clue in that respect is in the name. The function is to assist and be a friend to the court in the task of the court to determine the issue before it. It is not a function of the procedure to allow or encourage the court to express opinions on matters not relevant to the determination of the dispute, even if of some legal interest and importance. It is the parties who control the proceedings and define the dispute between them, which requires determination. It is this dispute which brings the matter before the court in the first place. And it is to this dispute, not another dispute, that has not been presented by the parties themselves, that the amicus curiae must direct its submissions. Submissions around a case that has been neither pleaded, argued, nor addressed by the parties themselves are liable to waste cost and time, it must be stressed, of the actual parties to the dispute. And it goes on. So be warned, any NGO that thinks of getting involved in the case and suddenly opening up a whole new line of argument, it won't work. And that's not really a criticism of IREC that I'm highlighting that, but the Supreme Court did take the opportunity to use their intervention as a warning to other parties that might try to push out the boundaries of any particular case. So, sparing interventions. So if the amicus curiae application is likely to present itself only rarely as an option, to circle back to where I started, all the guides being launched today together helpfully and expertly set out different options for pursuing court and non-court mechanisms to highlight or to seek a remedy, or maybe bring political pressure to bear in relation to a particular social justice or human rights issue. Accompanied with the possibility of exploring these options further through PILA and FLAC, as was mentioned earlier, and PILS NI, they should hopefully motivate groups to consider an additional strand to their advocacy work and how the law can be engaged to bring about positive social change. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Sinead. Our last speaker for today is a member of our peer review group, Conrad Wright. Conrad is also a founding trustee of the Association for Mixed Race Ireland and chair of its Irish Racial Justice Forum. He has also just completed his LLM in International Human Rights Law at the University of Galway, first class honors. Well done, Conrad.
Thank you, Shamika. I was just about to say I'm not embarrassed, but it's been a pleasure to be involved. To sort of get involved in the peer review. Yeah. As an NGO sort of peer reviewer, for me, I look back 5 years ago when I got involved in human rights work for our organization, and I say, my goodness, I wish I had these guides at that time, because, as you like to say, it's so simple. But as a reviewer, what I was looking for is simplicity, the lack of jargon, accessibility, understanding these mechanisms, and how to reach out for justice and who to go to. In my past in the organisation that I represent, we represent children who are in institutions. So I think most of you will be aware of the mother and baby homes and industrial abuse. And in our case, it's very much about racial abuse, which is not really being talked about. So we come at it from a very different angle. How do we seek justice for something that's really difficult to articulate, to explain to politicians? So we did a lot of lobbying when they set up the mother and baby home and tried to get the terms of condition to look at the equality clauses, and we got inserted into the terms and conditions that say the heads of terms a requirement of the commission to look at racism, to look at discrimination based on tribe or ethnicity, religion, all of these things we got inserted. But at the end of the day, when the commission report came out, we were really, really disappointed. So it's still battling for justice, and we've sought to go through the UN mechanism. So these guides for an NGO, they're very easy to navigate. Quite easy. There's lots of links in there in terms of the various different treaty bodies that you can access, who to reach out to. And I think maybe if I just describe some of the journey that I and my organization I'll explain, which actually talks to a lot of the aspects that are shown in this report. So there's a guide on the treaty bodies. The treaty bodies, there are 9 conventions, 9 treaty bodies, which are underpinned by human rights conventions, such as racial discrimination, such as civil and political rights, economic and social and cultural rights, the rights of the child, the rights of discrimination against women. So all of these treaties and conventions are hugely important, but for NGOs, each one is different. You've got to choose as an NGO which treaty concerns you. And in our case, the treaty that concerned us most was the Convention on the Elimination of Racial Discrimination. So for us, this guide guides us through how to access that body, and we have accessed that body on our own back, but with the help of academics such as David Keane, Dr. David Keane, who's an associate professor in DCU. We've had to reach out to academics to help us. Now we know we have these guides to go to, and I think it'll really help CSOs, NGOs navigate this very complex system. The treaty bodies, they're almost like a last resort. I think we have to exhaust our remedies in Ireland first before we go to the UN. Last year I won a place on the fellowship program. It's a 3-year fellowship, a 3-week fellowship program for people of African descent. They have these specific sort of programs. And one of the things they said to me was, Colin, if you want to engage with us, there's a risk. And I looked at the application before I signed the form. There's a risk to your life. I said, but what sort of a risk can it be? By engaging the UN, we've had people engage with us who've been abducted and assassinated, but that's not going to happen in Ireland. I think Ireland is an okay place to work with. So there are mechanisms and there are risks associated with dealing with the UN. But to be honest with you, I think for an NGO, it's really important to look at this as an alternative or where you're struggling to get justice within the Irish judicial system. So what I'll say is, thanks very much for inviting me. I think this is a wonderful initiative, very collaborative, and I really look forward to working with Pina Flack, Arthur Cox, and with other NGOs. It's a wonderful project, and well done, congratulations. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much for that. We are now going to open up the Q&A session. I think this is one of our speakers. If you have a question, just raise your hand. We need the mic to bring it over to you. And for those of you online as well, if you would like to ask a question, please just use the raise hand function, and we'll get to you.
Good question. And actually, that was probably my question as well, Shamika. Because we have these lovely leaflets in everybody's chairs.
So that's the great thing about having these guides available online, is that as legislation changes, the team at Arthur Cox or PILA, we can go in and we can make those updates and make those amendments. So these guides will remain relevant and up to date all times.
So we printed just a handful of the guides just to have them in real life, and which we share with Pila and the Pills project, but as Shamika has mentioned, the guides will really be available online for people to access on an ongoing basis, because even as we were working on the guides over the last year or two, the law was changing, new things were happening, and we wanted to keep this as up-to-date and comprehensive as we could. And I think that will certainly be a task that we'll be able to continue to work on together as time continues. So do check out the guides online. You'll find them by scanning the QR code on the leaflets on your chairs, and we'll do our best to keep the information up to date and relevant for people in each of the different areas. Any questions?
There don't appear to be any questions on the chat function. Just if anyone in the room.
Go ahead.
I'm just specifically interested in the collaboration with Northern Irish. I'm still really happy about
Yeah, it was quite fortunate, really. Thank you for the question. We initially started the project collaborating with Pila and Shamika and her team. And then as we continued our work on pro bono with the Belfast office, the Arthur Cox Belfast office, and our colleagues at the Pills project in Northern Ireland, we identified that they faced a similar need to user-friendly, easily accessible resources. And it just made sense when we realized that we were facing similar challenges to pool our talents together to work on the guides. And that's how the project came about with the Northern Irish team. And I am looking forward to traveling to Belfast, up to Belfast, I'm told to say, next week to launch the project guides there with Maria Matusky and Emma Cassidy and the team there. But it's very interesting, you know, we wouldn't have thought initially, oh, who else should we be partnering with on this project? But just in having conversation with other players in the pro bono sector, we identified a similar need in Northern Ireland. And I thought that's a real lesson learned, that if we can work with as many partners as possible on these projects, really we can do more together. And that's certainly what we've seen coming through on this project. So I'm very much looking forward to launching the guides in Belfast next week as well.
Thank you, Carol. I've just been told there's no raise hand function on for the online participants. Please use the Q&A function. And we do have one question that's come in. It says it's from Mary Teresa Kennedy, and she says, "Good morning. Thank you for the presentations. It was very difficult to hear online this morning. Can you make the webinar launch available later? And is all the guides fully accessible for people with disabilities? Audio activated PDFs and in easy read also. I can see them being very useful." So the guides and the launch will be available. As we said, the guides will be on Pila and Pearl's project websites. The launch will be up on our YouTube channel. So for those of you who had difficulty hearing us online, or if anybody here wants to watch it again, because I know how scintillating conversationists we are, you're all welcome to just look at our YouTube channel, FLAC YouTube channel, and it will be up there.
Thanks, Shamika. And I think that's such a good question, because they're living documents. As people in the NGO community start to engage with them, and if folks have comments or suggestions, we can incorporate that into the documents as time goes on, making them more useful, we hope, to the people we're seeking to help with them.
Okay.
Just wondering with the issue of training, you know, for the advocates, role we call advocates around human rights and the mental health system, for want of a better word. And very much isn't a place at the table, even in terms of IRAC and urgent cases in relation to the recently appointed somebody to the Disability Advisory Committee. But, you know, Conrad referenced it being a last resort to be when, for us actually, in many cases, it's the only resort, because really most organizations really don't want to know. I think we have to be really careful who's actually going as advocates, and that they're trained, and that, you know, if you have an organization that's embedded in the medical model itself, what type of, and yes, it's been useful IRAC as well in the courts, but some of it actually also needs to be challenged, because it's, as an organization, you know, IRAC itself typically is embedded in the medical model without intent. And I think even Arthur Cox, if you're doing advocacy or supporting advocacy, again, does that actually embed what we're trying to, you know, what some of these UN conventions, including the UNCOPD, is about. And the capacity legislation is going back into the Shannon tomorrow. And Patricia Ricker and Clark, who work for Arthur Cox, that was instrumental in terms of what we have in that legislation already, in terms of her advocacy, her voice was acceptable, Stage's voice was acceptable, not ours. So we have discriminatory exclusion which has been embedded likely tomorrow in the capacity legislation in relation to advanced healthcare directives. So for us, it's very much possibly the only resort we have with these mechanisms, not the last resort.
Yeah, can I just say something to that? I absolutely understand where you're coming from on that. We felt the same thing, but the treaty body mechanisms, as I'm sure you know, you've got to exhaust the remedies here go to court before you actually take, your case or your complaint to a treaty body. However, having said that, there are other mechanisms such as the reporting process. And we're involved in the reporting process where it's fantastic because any organisation can draft shadow reports. So every 5 years, the state is essentially accountable to treaty bodies and has to explain, where they're complying and how they're complying with the UN, the conventions. So CSO is really important to key into that and to actually watch what the state are saying and to draft their own shadow reports. And that's really useful because we went to Geneva in 2019 as part of CERD, and the vacancy and the number of CSOs going to Geneva to listen and to hear our government be held to account. It's a fantastic feeling, and I think Ireland is one of those countries where the UN recognise that there is an open private dialogue. So from that perspective, the legal perspective and taking a case, unfortunately, it's quite difficult. That's really all. Cheers.
Thank you for that, Conrad. I'm just going to use the mic because I believe our online audience is having a bit of difficulty hearing us. We have another question, and it is from an anonymous user. Are there any plans for more guides on other topics in the future? So, yes, there are plans for other guides in the future. We are working on another set of guides. So, yes, definitely there will be more guides coming up in the future. Any questions from anybody else in person? Can I just hold on? Let me get the mic to you.
Just to be very careful for NGOs in relation to what is put forward under the UN mechanisms. For example, diversion programs for the criminal justice system. That may seem like a very good idea, but actually very often they're embedded in the medical model. And you may actually see community treatment orders like, legalized community treatment orders on a statutory footing, which they have in the UK, where they can actually go in and drag somebody, police arrive and drag somebody out of an apartment or a home or a workplace. And, if they're not compliant, so we actually have people who are taking their own lives in the UK and here, even though there aren't formal community treatment orders. So just NGOs need to be really careful what they're actually advocating for and using these mechanisms for.
Fiona Walsh. Thank you, Fiona. All right, do we have any other questions?
Well, maybe as we wrap up, Fiona's kindly made some very helpful comments. We also had a question there about future guides. I think it's important to note that this is the first collaboration that we've had together on the guides, but we really do want to hear from the NGO community and from organisations like Fiona's about what more we can do in this space, because I think this is the first successful collaboration of its kind. We can see that it will be beneficial to have further documents, having training on the documents, what else we can do in this space. We really want to hear, because these types of projects will only work well if they're meeting the needs of people in the community. So that's why it's important that we hear as much as we can from our partners, from you, from the folks in the room today, and our friends joining us online, how we can help and what the needs are. Because it's interesting, we work on pro bono at Arthur Cox, and we're trying to help the people that are most in need of help in our community. Because if you think about it, the people most in need of help, marginalised and vulnerable people, they don't know what pro bono is. They don't know who Arthur Cox are. So how is it that we're able to help them? It's really through folks like yourselves getting in contact through collaborations with organisations like FLAC and the PILA team. So please do get in touch, because it's only with your support that we're able to make sure that we're helping where it's needed most and helping the people that need help the most as well. Maybe a final check to see if there's any last questions or comments. Well, I see a very, sorry for the folks at home, but I see a very nice breakfast spread available to us next. So I think you need to check that out, Shamika.
Yes, definitely. Before we go to that, I just want to say thank you all to everybody today. A lot of hard work has gone to the creation of these guides, and I'd like to say thank you to our partners at the Pulse Project, Maria and Emma, for all the hard work that you guys have done. Cox, Caroline and her team, it's been amazing. And of course, our peer reviewers, Conrad and the rest of the team as well. And I just want to say one special thank you to Metra from Pulse, she's from PILA. She's done such an amazing job getting everything set up today. Thank you all for attending. And please, as Caroline said, there's the breakfast.